Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into the vast, endless Pacific Ocean, a place where time wasn't measured by ticking clocks or smartphone notifications, but by the rhythms of nature itself. Imagine you're aboard a traditional Polynesian canoe, the wind catching the sails, the stars above guiding your way. There's no GPS, no compass, just the stars, the waves, and something even more fascinating, the moonfish. This isn't just some random creature. It's an integral part of how ancient Polynesians kept track of time. Yes, time was literally measured by fish. If you think that sounds bizarre, you're not alone. But it's one of the coolest and most unique forms of timekeeping you've probably never heard of. Now, before you get too comfortable on your pillow, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, I'm curious, drop your location and local time in the comments. Where in the world are you and what time are you listening to? I'm always fascinated to know where this journey reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the story unfolds, you'll realize that Polynesian timekeeping wasn't about counting minutes or hours. Instead, it was all about using the natural world to understand the passage of time, and the moonfish played a crucial role. To the untrained eye, the moonfish may seem like just another quirky marine animal, but to the Polynesians, its behavior was as predictable as the sun rising each day. Its patterns, tied closely to lunar cycles, were the clock that ruled the vast expanse of the Pacific. The Pacific Ocean is massive, stretching across thousands of miles, with small island clusters dotted like stepping stones across this watery expanse. Navigating through these waters without modern technology might seem impossible, but for the ancient Polynesians, it wasn't just about following the stars. It was about interpreting the signs around them. The moonfish, with its connection to lunar phases, became a living, breathing timepiece you probably don't even need to picture yourself navigating these vast waters. Just think about how different the world would be if you had to depend on a fish to tell you the time. The moonfish, called Mini in some Polynesian dialects, wasn't just a marine animal but a crucial part of the Polynesian calendar. If you ever wondered how early societies managed without sophisticated clocks or calendars, well, here's a peek into how they did it. These fish swimming with the tides didn't just help track lunar cycles, they were the cycles, and their presence was key to the way the Polynesians timed everything. From travel to religious ceremonies. It's hard for us, in this modern world of screens and seconds, to imagine a time when people were so in tune with the natural rhythms of the world. But for the Polynesians, time wasn't a commodity to be measured or spent. It was a vast ocean, ebbing and flowing like the tides themselves. And just like that, the moonfish became an anchor in the deep, quiet sea of time. But how did these fish become so integral to Polynesian society? Let's dive a little deeper into that. As you sink deeper into this vast ocean of ancient Polynesian knowledge, let's talk about the navigators, the true masters of the seas. Picture yourself aboard a double-hulled canoe, the deck rocking gently underfoot, the cool wind rustling your clothes. There's no compass, no radar, and no street signs to guide you, only the stars, the tides, and the living creatures around you. Among these creatures was the moonfish, which played a role even bigger than you'd expect. For the Polynesians, navigation wasn't just about following a straight line from one island to the next. It was about reading the environment, understanding the signs that nature gave you, and interpreting them in a way that allowed you to move across the Pacific with confidence. And yes, one of those signs came from the moonfish. These fish helped sailors know when the lunar cycle was changing, an incredibly important factor when you're relying on the moon to guide your way. Now, you're probably wondering, how could a fish possibly help a seasoned navigator figure out which direction to go? Well, the answer is simple timing. The moonfish's patterns aligned with the phases of the moon, and its behavior marked specific periods in the lunar cycle. The fish's movement was so predictable that it essentially became the lunar clock for these sailors. If you could track the fish's cycles, you could understand which phase of the moon you were in, and from there, adjust your course accordingly. Historians still argue whether the moonfish was used across all of Polynesia, or if it was a regional phenomenon specific to certain island groups. But there's no denying the fact that, for those who used it, the moonfish was as reliable as the stars. In fact, the Polynesians used the stars to navigate at night, and these celestial bodies were just as predictable as the moonfish's behavior. It was as though the entire natural world had synchronized, creating a kind of celestial time zone that the Polynesians could follow no matter where they were. Talk about a sophisticated GPS system. Imagine navigating across thousands of miles of open ocean without any of the technology we take for granted today. No satellites, no maps, just the stars above and the moonfish below. In many ways, the moonfish was the Polynesian equivalent of a modern-day clock. And not just any clock, but one that provided precise, reliable timekeeping for voyages that could last weeks or even months. But here's the interesting part. The relationship between the moonfish and the moon wasn't entirely straightforward. The moonfish's cycles didn't always align perfectly with the phases of the moon. Sometimes there were delays an issue that Polynesian navigators had to account for as they sailed across the vast expanse of the Pacific. This required a deep understanding of nature's rhythms and an ability to adjust to the subtle fluctuations in timing. Navigators weren't just following a fixed schedule, they were interpreting nature's complex, ever-changing signals. For a moment, just imagine the patience required for this. Picture yourself on one of those canoes, gliding silently through the night, your gaze fixed on the stars above and the moonfish swimming below. You'd have to read the environment, pick up on tiny shifts, and adjust your movements in response to the natural world's constant ebb and flow. It's not just about timing, it's about developing an intricate understanding of how everything in nature is connected: the stars, the moon, the fish, the tides, and even the wind. The Polynesians didn't rely solely on one indicator to know where they were or when to set sail. They had multiple systems at play: lunar, stellar, and environmental. But the moonfish was a critical piece of this puzzle, providing sailors with a consistent and natural way of tracking time across immense distances. It's amazing to think that an entire culture, a whole civilization, could navigate such a massive expanse of ocean with nothing more than their deep connection to nature. Their instincts and the behaviors of a fish dot, it's hard for us to grasp. The precision and sophistication of these systems when we have everything at the touch of a button. Yet the Polynesians did it time and time again, crossing the vastness of the Pacific, guided by the stars and the moonfish. Their knowledge was a perfect fusion of observation, intuition, and experience, a kind of wisdom that's almost forgotten in today's world. But it wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. This was about living in harmony with the world around them, understanding the tides of time and using them to shape their journey's dot. So as you settle deeper into sleep, think about how the Polynesians lived constantly aware of the rhythms of nature, using every sign, every pattern to guide them forward. It's not just a history lesson. It's a reminder of how deeply connected we once were to the natural world. Now that you're settled into the rhythm of Polynesian navigation, let's take a closer look at the moonfish itself. Imagine being out on a canoe, the soft lap of the waves against the hull, the smell of salt water filling the air. The sky above is a tapestry of stars, the moon casting a gentle glow over the ocean. As you drift through the night, that below the surface, the moonfish is swimming in perfect sync with the lunar cycle. It's not just a fish, it's the clock of the sea. The moonfish, or mean, was not just an ordinary marine creature. It's an intriguing fish, its behavior deeply tied to the lunar phases. The fish's name alone is a giveaway. It's often associated with the moon, and for good reason. Its body glows faintly in the dark waters, an iridescent shimmer that mirrors the moon's light above. In many ways, it was nature's reminder that time doesn't wait, it keeps moving, even when we're not looking. But here's the quirky part. The moonfish's behavior wasn't just an incidental result of the moon's phases, it was directly tied to them. Historians and marine biologists have studied how the fish seems to respond to the lunar cycle, particularly the full moon. When the moon is full, the moonfish are more active, swimming close to the surface, making them visible to fishermen. The fish's movements were so predictable, in fact, that they were seen as a perfect marker of time for Polynesian sailors. The moonfish didn't just appear on the full moon, however. It was also tied to other key lunar events. As the moon waxed and waned, the behavior of the moonfish changed in subtle ways. For the Polynesians, these shifts were not random. They marked key moments in the lunar calendar. Moments when certain actions were required, like setting sail, harvesting, or holding religious ceremonies. The fish acted like a natural timer, giving a specific, timekeeping rhythm to everyday life. Historians still argue whether the fish's timing was understood in a truly scientific sense, or if it was more intuitive based on generations of observation and the natural wisdom passed down through the ages. Either way, what's clear is that the moonfish wasn't just part of the ecosystem. It was part of the fabric of Polynesian life itself. The fish, with its patterns and rhythms, helped link the moon's phases to human activity, an extraordinary fusion of nature's cycles and human ingenuity. Now, let's pause for a second and reflect on just how deeply the Polynesians must have observed these creatures. Over the centuries, they didn't just watch the moonfish, they became experts at predicting its behavior, at understanding the subtle patterns that indicated which phase the moon was in. If you had lived during this time, you would have learned the rhythm of the moonfish's movements from your elders, passed down like a sacred text of sorts. It would have been more than a simple fact. It would have been part of your identity. For the Polynesian fishermen, this knowledge was crucial. They didn't have modern tools to tell them when to fish or how to fish. They had the behavior of the moonfish, and it was their guide. The relationship between the fish and the moon meant that their fishing was as much about timing as it was about skill. Catching the moonfish during certain phases wasn't just about following nature. It was about understanding it so deeply that the fish, almost like an old friend, seemed to speak directly to them. And if you think about it, this approach to timekeeping isn't all that different from the ways we use natural cues today. Sure, we rely on our smartphones for the time, but we still look to nature for guidance. Think of the way the weather can tell us when to pack a jacket, or how the setting sun marks the end of the day. The moonfish was just one piece in the grand puzzle of natural timekeeping, but it was crucial. But the moonfish wasn't only a timekeeper, it was also a symbol. In many Polynesian cultures, the fish held spiritual significance. It wasn't just a marker of time. It was a reminder that the natural world was a living, breathing entity, one that could guide, protect, and sustain you if you understood it properly. The fish was a bridge between the physical world of the sea and the spiritual world of the stars. And that's what makes the moonfish so fascinating, not just its utility in timekeeping, but its deeper connection to Polynesian spirituality. The fish wasn't a separate entity, a mere tool to be used. It was a part of a much larger cosmology. The moonfish's cycles were directly connected to the rhythms of the earth and the heavens, and through it, the Polynesians could align themselves with the universe. Imagine how that must have felt living in a world where everything, from the moon above to the fish below, had a purpose, a role to play in the grand cosmic design. For the Polynesians, the moonfish wasn't just a timekeeper. It was a messenger, a link to the divine order of things. And as you lie here, drifting off to sleep, let that thought settle with you. The world around us, with all its quiet rhythms and unseen forces, has its own way of keeping time. If only we know how to listen to it as the night deepens. Let's explore how the ancient Polynesians turned the moonfish's movements into a structured system of timekeeping, essentially giving the moonfish its place in the calendar. Picture yourself back on that Polynesian canoe, the moon above, reflecting on the water's surface like a shimmering mirror. You're not just sailing aimlessly. Every movement, every star, and every wave is part of a bigger picture. The moonfish, like a living clock, was key to knowing when to sail, when to harvest, and even when to celebrate. Polynesian timekeeping wasn't the rigid, mechanical system we think of today. Instead, it was fluid and tied to the natural world, shaped by the moon's cycles and the behavior of local creatures like the moonfish. The lunar phases from new moon to full moon were not simply markers of time, but periods during which certain activities could or should take place. When the moon was waxing, it might signal the best time for planting crops or setting sail. And when it was waning, it can mark a period of rest or reflection. But it wasn't just the moon that shaped their calendar. The moonfish's behavior was directly linked to these lunar phases, making it an essential part of the Polynesian calendar system. If the moonfish was active and swimming close to the surface, it signaled that a particular lunar phase was underway, and that activity on land or sea needed to align with that phase. The fishermen would know that it was time to harvest certain types of fish, farmers would understand when to plant their crops, and navigators would adjust their sails to follow the lunar cycle. Historians have often debated how advanced the Polynesian calendar system really was. Was it a strict, well-documented system, like the Mayan calendar, or was it a more intuitive oral tradition passed down from generation to generation? While we may never know for sure, what's clear is that the Polynesians understood the importance of lunar cycles and the creatures that responded to them. The moonfish, in its own quiet way, became a natural timekeeper, guiding Polynesians through their agricultural and navigational routines. And what's particularly fascinating is how specific behaviors of the moonfish would correspond to specific activities in Polynesian life. For example, during certain lunar phases, moonfish would congregate in large numbers, swimming closer to the surface where they were easier to catch. Fishermen knew that these times marked the ideal moment for fishing expeditions. The lunar cycle, guided by the moonfish, wasn't just an abstract concept, it was practical, actionable information that could be used to time the seasons of their lives. What's also interesting is that the moonfish's movements weren't always perfectly aligned with the phases of the moon. Sometimes the fish would be more active in a phase when the moon wasn't as visible or when it had just begun waxing. Navigators and farmers had to take these slight variations into account, adjusting their activities accordingly. It wasn't about precision down to the minute or second. It was more about aligning with the natural rhythms of the world. This flexibility in the system points to something deeper about Polynesian timekeeping. It was about harmony, not exactitude. The cycles of the moon, the patterns of the fish, and the rhythms of the tides were all interconnected. The moonfish didn't just measure time in isolation, it was part of a much larger cosmic web, where the actions of one creature or event had ripple effects on the others. Time for the Polynesians wasn't a series of isolated moments. It was an interconnected flow, guided by natural patterns and signs. But how did they keep track of all this without writing it down or recording it on calendars? The answer lies in the power of oral tradition. Just like the wisdom of their ancestors, knowledge of the moonfish's cycles and how they related to the lunar phases was passed down through storytelling, song, and communal rituals. Elders who had spent years studying the moonfish could explain the timing of its movements in relation to the lunar cycle. This was knowledge woven into the fabric of daily life, something everyone knew because it was part of the cultural consciousness. One of the most striking things about this system of timekeeping was how it wasn't limited to just one island or group of Polynesians. The entire Pacific was united in this understanding of time. While different island groups may have had slightly different ways of interpreting the moonfish's behavior, the basic principles were universal across the region. Sailors, farmers, and fishermen from far-flung islands shared a common language of time that connected them all, even though they were separated by vast stretches of ocean. That's what made their connection to the natural world so powerful. It wasn't just about local knowledge. It was knowledge that transcended boundaries. Imagine how profound that sense of shared understanding must have been, being part of a network of people all guided by the same natural principles, all following the same cosmic rhythm. It's a reminder that time, in its most fundamental sense, is not a human construct, but something we experience in relation to the world around us. And the moonfish, quietly swimming beneath the waves, was there to guide the Polynesians every step of the way. As you let this sink in, think about how our own ways of marking time are so often disconnected from nature. We rely on mechanical clocks and calendars, but the Polynesians lived with time in a more fluid, organic way. Time for them wasn't a number on a face of a watch. It was an experience, something lived in harmony with the environment. And as you drift further into sleep, let that idea linger with you. Time is not something we control. It's something we move with, like the tides and the rhythms of the moon. As you sink deeper into the rhythmic flow of this story, let's shift gears and explore the sacred nature of the moonfish to the Polynesians. Imagine yourself now not just a navigator or fisherman, but someone deeply connected to the spiritual world of the islands. Picture the gentle lapping of the waves as you sit by the shore, the sky painted with stars, and the moonfish swimming. Just below the surface, its iridescent body flickering like a celestial being. For the Polynesians, the moonfish wasn't just a tool for keeping time. It was a living symbol of divine order, a physical manifestation of cosmic forces. The moonfish, or mean, was often regarded as a sacred creature in many Polynesian cultures. Its appearance, especially during certain lunar phases, was seen as a sign from the gods, a symbol that the balance of nature was intact. To the Polynesians, the idea that nature could speak to them directly through creatures like the moonfish was not a strange superstition. It was an essential part of their worldview. The fish wasn't just an object to observe. It was a messenger, a guide, and a reminder that the forces of nature were intimately connected to their daily lives. The sacredness wasn't just symbolic, it was woven into the fabric of Polynesian religious practices. Ceremonies would often be timed with the moon's phases, and certain rituals would be centered around the moonfish and other creatures that followed the lunar cycle. It's almost as if the islanders saw the whole world as a grand spiritual clock, with every creature, an event aligning to the divine rhythms of the universe, and the moonfish, as a living, swimming part of that divine mechanism, played a pivotal role. Now, it's easy to imagine that such deep spiritual connections to natural elements might seem a little mystical or even fantastical in today's world. But in the ancient Polynesian context, these beliefs were grounded in practical experience. The moonfish's behavior, its appearance during specific phases of the moon, wasn't just a coincidence. It was a reliable, observable pattern that had real-world consequences. Misconnection between the spiritual and the practical gave the Polynesians a profound sense of harmony with the world around them. They didn't see the spiritual world as something separate from the material world. It was all intertwined. Historians still debate the extent to which these beliefs shaped Polynesian societies. Some argue that the moonfish, as a sacred creature, was central to the spiritual life of the people, while others suggest that its significance was more functional than mystical. But what's clear is that the moonfish, whether seen as a divine symbol or simply a key to understanding time, was revered. It played a crucial role in maintaining the delicate balance between the physical world and the spiritual one. It's worth noting that the moonfish wasn't the only creature tied to the lunar cycle in Polynesian culture. Other marine animals, like the octopus and certain species of fish, were also believed to have connections to the moon and were involved in various ceremonies. These creatures, in many ways, were seen as manifestations of the moon's power, intermediaries between the heavens and the earth. Just as the moonfish guided sailors and fishermen, these animals were thought to guide spiritual practices, offering insights into the divine world. As we move through this exploration, think about the way our modern understanding of the world often separates the spiritual from the physical. We see religion and science as two distinct domains, but for the Polynesians, there was no such divide. The moonfish didn't just tell time. It was a bridge between the sacred and the everyday, a reminder that all of life, from the smallest fish to the largest island, was part of a larger cosmic design. In many ways, the Polynesians' reverence for creatures like the moonfish teaches us something important. It reminds us that we are not separate from nature, but intrinsically connected to it. Just as the moonfish's behavior was in sync with the lunar cycle, so too are we, in our own way, part of the natural rhythms of the world. We may not use the moonfish as our timekeeper today, but there are other creatures, other rhythms that still guide us. The tides, the seasons, the changing of the moon, they're still part of our world, still affecting us in ways we often don't notice. So, as you lie here, drifting off to sleep, let yourself think about how deeply connected we are to the natural world, even if we don't always recognize it. The moonfish, the stars, the tides, they're all reminders of the ancient wisdom that once guided people across the vast oceans. And who knows, maybe we can learn a thing or two from the Polynesians about living in tune with the world around us, rather than trying to control it. Just like the moonfish swims through the cycles of the moon, maybe we can let ourselves move through the cycles of life with a little more ease, a little more grace. As you continue to relax and drift deeper into the story, let's venture a little further into how the ancient Polynesians not only used the moonfish to track time, but also how they integrated it into their spiritual and societal practices. Imagine yourself once more on the gentle rocking of a Polynesian canoe, feeling the cool night air as you glide across the water. The full moon casts its silver light across the sea, and somewhere beneath the surface, the moonfish is swimming in its sacred, synchronized dance. For the Polynesians, this wasn't just a fish, it was a powerful reminder that everything had a purpose, and that time itself was governed by a larger cosmic order. What's fascinating about the moonfish's role in Polynesian culture is how deeply integrated it was into their mythologies and rituals. This wasn't just about keeping track of when to sail or when to plant crops. It was about understanding that time had a spiritual dimension. The moonfish, as it swam in its cyclical rhythm, symbolized not just the passage of time, but the deeper cyclical nature of life itself. Life, death, rebirth, all were part of an ongoing cycle. Just like the moon's phases and the moonfish's movements, some Polynesian legends even suggested that the moonfish was a messenger between the gods and the people, helping humans understand the rhythms of the universe. In these stories, the moonfish often played a role in guiding the souls of the departed to the afterlife, emphasizing its importance as a spiritual bridge. The Polynesians believed that life on Earth was intertwined with the heavens, and the moonfish, with its glowing, otherworldly presence, became a symbol of that connection. Historians still debate whether these spiritual beliefs were central, part of everyday life, or if they were reserved for the more religious or ceremonial moments. Some argue that the moonfish's connection to the spiritual world was understood on a more personal, intimate level, while others suggest that its significance was more communal, tied to the larger rituals of the island. Either way, it's clear that the moonfish played a role far beyond just being a biological creature. It was a living symbol of the divine. These spiritual associations were not confined to just the moonfish. The entire ecosystem, from the tides to the winds, was seen as imbued with spiritual meaning. Nature was not just a backdrop for human life, it was part of a larger, interconnected web of existence. For the Polynesians, the boundaries between the sacred and the mundane were much blurrier than we might think today. Life itself was a series of rituals, both spiritual and practical, that reflected the larger rhythms of the world. As you imagine this world, think about the unique way the Polynesians might have seen time. For them, the passage of time wasn't a linear progression like the ticking of a clock. Instead, it was cyclical, constantly repeating itself with moments of birth, growth, decay, and renewal. The moonfish, with its rhythmic, almost predictable movements, perfectly embodied this cyclical view of time. Its behavior acted as a guide, not just for practical activities like fishing and navigation, but for spiritual reflection as well. This cyclical nature of time influenced every aspect of life on the islands, from daily routines to large-scale ceremonies. It wasn't uncommon for entire communities to come together to mark the phases of the moon, celebrating the different stages of life, from birth to death, and everything in between. These celebrations were often tied to the moonfish's movements, as its appearance marked key points in the lunar calendar. The fish's presence became an important indicator of when to begin certain tasks, but it also served as a reminder of the larger cosmic forces at play. What's also interesting is that the moonfish, despite its sacred significance, wasn't just revered. It was also seen as a resource, an important part of the ecosystem that could be harvested if done in alignment with nature's cycles. This respect for the moonfish as both a spiritual symbol and a physical resource highlights the Polynesians' deep understanding of balance. They didn't see the natural world as something to be exploited. They understood that their survival depended on living in harmony with it. You might be wondering, then, how such spiritual beliefs could translate into practical timekeeping. The answer lies in the Polynesian approach to navigation and survival. The moonfish's behavior was so predictable that it became an integral part of the timing for fishing, sailing, and even farming. But the connection between the fish and the cosmos also tied these activities to a deeper spiritual meaning. Time wasn't just a series of moments to be measured. It was a sacred flow to be respected. What's particularly fascinating is how this system of timekeeping, though deeply spiritual, was also practical. For example, fishermen used the moonfish's predictable behavior to decide the best times to fish. They would observe its movements, paying close attention to when it swam closer to the surface, indicating the right time to cast their nets. Navigators, too, would use the lunar phases coordinated with the moonfish's behavior to plan their voyages across the vast Pacific Ocean. The lunar phases weren't just a concept. They were deeply tied to the rhythms of the natural world, guiding the Polynesians in their daily lives. Now, as you relax, let your mind wander back to those peaceful waters. Picture the moonfish, glowing softly under the surface, its body shifting with the phases of the moon. It's a quiet, rhythmic dance that's been happening for centuries, a dance that speaks to the deep, interconnected nature of life. Just as the fish moves through the waters, so do the people move through their days, guided by the invisible forces that govern both the sea and the sky dot in the Polynesian view. Time wasn't something to be controlled or rushed. It was something to be honored, observed, and moved through with a sense of harmony. As you drift deeper into sleep, let that understanding of time settle with you. It's not just about ticking clocks or busy schedules. Time, in its truest form, is part of a larger natural rhythm, a rhythm we're all a part of. Whether we realize it or not, Dot, as you continue to sink deeper into relaxation, let's turn our attention to how the Polynesians used their celestial knowledge and the behavior of the moonfish to guide their most crucial voyages. Picture yourself aboard a traditional double-hulled canoe, feeling the rhythm of the waves beneath you as the full moon rises over the horizon. You're navigating the vast Pacific Ocean, one of the most impressive, complex feats of human exploration. But here's the thing: the stars, the moon, the tides, and of course, the moonfish are all guiding you. And you're not alone. This same knowledge has been passed down through generations, and now it's your turn to sail with the ancestors. The ancient Polynesians are renowned for their extraordinary navigational skills. They didn't have compasses or charts like we do today. They had the natural world to guide them. The moon's phases were integral to understanding both the timing and direction of their voyages. In fact, the Polynesians used the position of the stars, the wind, the currents, and the behavior of sea creatures like the moonfish to navigate over vast distances that modern sailors would consider daunting, if not impossible, to travel without advanced technology. The moonfish, specifically, was a signpost of sorts. Its appearance, or its movements near the surface, signaled certain times and conditions that made it ideal for long ocean journeys. The phases of the moon played a huge role in determining when to sail, especially on long voyages that might span weeks or even months. The moonfish's presence or absence, aligned with these phases, helped ensure that sailors knew when to set out and when it was time to rest. Historians still debate how much of this navigational knowledge was explicitly documented, or whether it was mostly passed down orally through generations. Some scholars suggest that the moonfish's role in Polynesian navigation was more symbolic than practical, while others argue that it was a key indicator for determining the best times for certain activities. Regardless of how it was recorded, there's no question that the Polynesians had a profound understanding of the natural world. This knowledge allowed them to sail confidently across the Pacific, finding new islands and thriving in some of the most isolated regions of the Earth. Imagine, as you rest, how challenging it must have been to depend on the natural world for everything: the wind, the stars, the currents, and even the behavior of the moonfish. Navigating the open sea without any of the modern technology we take for granted must have been an act of incredible trust in the environment. But for the Polynesians, this wasn't a gamble. It was a deep, intimate knowledge of the rhythms of nature. The moonfish wasn't just a random element, it was a key piece of a much larger puzzle. And understanding its patterns meant understanding the pulse of the world around them. You might also be wondering how all of this worked in practice. Well, Polynesian navigators weren't just passive observers of the moonfish and other natural signs. They were active participants in this vast web of interconnected forces. A skilled navigator would know exactly when to look for certain signs, like the moonfish, and how to interpret them. The fish wasn't just a passive marker of time, it was a signal that certain conditions were ideal for navigating specific routes. The way the system worked was both sophisticated and deeply practical. For example, different phases of the moon were associated with different winds, tides, and currents. A full moon might signal the start of a particular journey, while a new moon could mark the ideal time for fishing or harvesting. The moonfishes. Predictable movements in sync with the lunar cycle help sailors align their voyages with the right conditions. These natural signs gave the Polynesians the confidence to travel vast distances, knowing that they were following a path set by nature itself. But beyond practicality, this connection between time and the natural world had a spiritual dimension. Just as the moonfish symbolized the passage of time, it also symbolized the interconnectedness of all things sky, sea, and earth. Navigating wasn't just about getting from one place to another. It was about honoring the forces that made the journey possible. The Polynesians didn't just sail, they journeyed with the knowledge that their actions were part of a larger, divine cycle. In this way, the moonfish wasn't just a timekeeper, it was a companion on the journey. Its movements, tied to the rhythms of the moon, were as much a guide as the stars themselves. The idea that time and space were interconnected was so deeply ingrained in Polynesian culture that it shaped every aspect of their daily life, from fishing and farming to sailing and worship. Now, as you relax further, try to imagine yourself back on that canoe, gliding through the waves under a moonlit sky, with the moonfish swimming below, guiding you. You might not be on a physical voyage, but there's a certain kind of journey that the Polynesians understood, one that flows in rhythm with the universe. And just like those early navigators, maybe we too can learn to align ourselves with the natural rhythms of the world. There's something calming about that idea that life, in its essence, is a journey. And perhaps the best way to sail through it is not to try to control every moment, but to flow with the tides, to understand the phases, to trust in the guidance of the forces around us, just like the Polynesians trusted in the moonfish. As you settle into sleep, let that peaceful understanding wash over you, like the quiet movement of the moonfish beneath the waves. As you settle deeper into relaxation, let's take a moment to zoom out and reflect on just how vast the Polynesian navigational system truly was. You're still there on the boat, floating on the endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean, but now imagine the way the Polynesians saw the sea. It wasn't just a body of water to be crossed, it was a living, breathing entity filled with subtle clues that guided their way. The moonfish, the stars, the tides, they weren't just tools for navigation. They were companions, part of a much larger cosmology that connected the land, the sea, and the sky. In Polynesian culture, the vastness of the ocean wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. The ocean was seen as a network of interconnected islands, a kind of spiritual map where every island had a distinct personality and place in the world. Navigators weren't just finding a direction, they were following a path that had been laid out by their ancestors, a path informed by a profound understanding of the natural world. The knowledge they carried wasn't just for survival, it was a way of life, a way of connecting with the universe. Historians still debate how much of this knowledge was passed down through formal education and how much was learned through personal experience. Some suggest that young navigators were mentored by elders, learning how to read the stars, observe the behaviors of sea creatures like the moonfish, and understand the ever-changing conditions of the ocean. Others argue that the knowledge was more decentralized, passed along through stories and songs, with each community maintaining its own unique navigational practices. But one thing is certain, the Polynesians possessed an incredibly sophisticated and intuitive grasp of the natural world, and they used this to guide them across the most vast and challenging ocean on Earth. Now, you may be wondering just how far the Polynesians sailed. The distances they covered are nothing short of staggering. Imagine traveling over 1,000 miles from one island to another, navigating not only by the stars, but by the very behavior of the creatures beneath the waves. The moonfish, as a symbol of the lunar cycle, would be a key guide in these long voyages, helping sailors to determine the best time to set out and, just as importantly, when to turn back. They didn't have GPS or radar, just a profound relationship with the world around them. The ocean was their map, and they read it with the same careful attention that a skilled artist reads a canvas. And it wasn't just about getting from one island to another. For the Polynesians, sailing was a spiritual journey, an act of honoring the forces that govern the world. Navigators were not just skilled sailors, they were deeply respected spiritual leaders whose understanding of the natural world was considered to be a form of divine knowledge. In many ways, they were the bridge between the heavens and the earth, guiding their people through the ocean, connecting them to the gods, and keeping them in harmony with the world around them. This blend of practical and spiritual knowledge formed the foundation of Polynesian navigation, and the moonfish, in all its glowing, cyclical glory, was a key part of that system. As a timekeeper, the moonfish helped navigators understand the delicate balance of the universe, the ebb and flow of the tides, the waxing and waning of the moon, and the constant cycle of life. Every time the moonfish appeared near the surface, it was a reminder that the cosmos was alive and that the forces of the natural world were in constant motion. Just as the moonfish relied on the rhythms of the ocean, so too did the Polynesians rely on these same rhythms to guide their way. Imagine being a Polynesian navigator, watching the moonfish swim beneath the surface, its body glowing faintly in the moonlight. You know that its movements are tied to the lunar phases, which in turn are tied to the very tides that shape your journey. Each moment feels imbued with meaning, as if the world itself is unfolding according to a divine plan. You feel connected not just to the sea and the sky, but to the ancestors who sailed before you, whose spirits live on in the stars, the winds, and yes, the moonfish. For you, sailing is more than just a journey. It is an act of reverence, a way of being in tune with the rhythms of the universe. And as you lie there, letting your mind wander through these thoughts, it becomes clear how much trust the Polynesians placed in their environment. It wasn't just a matter of survival, it was a matter of living in harmony with the world. The moonfish, with its connection to the lunar cycle, became a symbol of that harmony. It wasn't just a biological creature, it was a sacred reminder that time itself was part of a larger cosmic dance. Now, as you relax even further, imagine the vastness of the ocean around you once more. The sky above is full of stars, each one a guide on your journey. The moonfish swims just below the surface, its silvery body flickering with the movement of the water. You are part of this rhythm, part of this great cosmic dance, moving through time as gracefully as the waves themselves. It's a peaceful thought, isn't it? That we too are part of a larger flow, and just like the Polynesians, we can trust that the universe will guide us when we are in tune with its rhythms. As you begin to settle deeper into relaxation, we now turn our attention to the fascinating world of Polynesian oral traditions and how they helped preserve and pass down the sacred knowledge of the moonfish and other navigational practices. Imagine the scene now, quiet and serene, as the stars glisten above you, the moon casting its pale light on the calm ocean. You're not alone on this journey. Surrounding you are voices, echoes of your ancestors who sailed these same waters long before you. Their stories, their wisdom live on, carried through the generations by the art of storytelling. In Polynesian culture, oral tradition wasn't just a way to pass the time. It was the way knowledge was preserved. From the stars to the sea, from the movement of the moonfish to the intricacies of navigation, every piece of knowledge was passed down through chants, songs, and stories. These traditions were the lifeblood of the Polynesian way of life, ensuring that the wisdom of the ancestors continued to guide the living. Historians still argue over the extent to which Polynesian navigators had formal training, but there's no doubt that these oral traditions played a crucial role. The stories and chants weren't simply about the facts, they were about embedding these facts into the hearts and minds of each new generation. A young navigator sitting around the fire with the elders would listen intently as stories were told of long voyages, of distant islands, and of the sacred moonfish. These tales were rich with meaning, full of metaphors and symbols that helped the listener understand the deeper connections between the physical world and the spiritual one. What's particularly striking is the way in which these stories connected the past to the present. The sea, the moon, the fish, everything was understood not as static, but as part of an ongoing, living tradition. The very act of sailing wasn't just about reaching a destination. It was about participating in a much larger cosmic dance that had been going on for eons. This was a dance of the past, the present, and the future, and each navigator, each fisherman, each sailor was a part of it. Some stories, for example, describe the moonfish as a kind of guide, leading voyagers safely across the vast ocean. The fish wasn't just a creature, it was a spiritual being, a manifestation of the gods, and a reminder that the navigators were never truly alone. These stories imbued the act of sailing with a sense of sacredness. Every wave, every gust of wind, every flicker of moonlight on the water had meaning, a connection to the divine. For the Polynesians, sailing wasn't just about reaching a new island. It was about participating in a much larger divine journey. The use of the moonfish in these stories is particularly telling. Its predictable movements, tied to the lunar phases, made it the perfect symbol for the cyclical nature of time, life, and the universe itself. The moonfish wasn't just a timekeeper, it was a living embodiment of the interconnectedness of all things. Its dance beneath the surface of the ocean mirrored the dance of the stars above, and its appearance marked the passage of time in a way that was both practical and deeply spiritual. And then there's the role of the navigator in these stories. The navigator was more than just a sailor, he was a spiritual leader. A guide who had the sacred responsibility of interpreting the signs of nature and leading his people safely across the ocean. The navigator's job was not just to know the stars and the winds. He had to understand the deeper meanings behind them, to interpret the messages that the ocean, the fish, and the moon were sending. It was a job that required not only knowledge, but wisdom. And it was passed down through generations via these oral traditions. The process of learning to be a navigator was long and rigorous. It involved years of observation, practice, and most importantly, listening. The elder navigators would pass their knowledge down to the younger generations, sharing not just facts, but experiences. The stories they told were lessons, not just about the stars or the winds, but about how to live in harmony with the natural world. They were teaching not just how to navigate the ocean, but how to navigate life itself. But the role of the moonfish in these stories isn't just about being a symbol or a timekeeper, it's also about connection. The fish, like the stars and the moon, represented the ways in which the natural world could communicate with the people. And of course, the fish wasn't just a metaphor, it was real. It was alive, and it was part of the environment that sustained the Polynesians. The moonfish was a reminder that the world was full of signs, and those signs were there to help guide the people, whether on a voyage or through the challenges of life. Now, imagine yourself back on that canoe, surrounded by the soft hum of the ocean. You're not just navigating the seas, you're participating in an ancient tradition. The stars above you are the same stars your ancestors saw, the same stars that guided them across vast distances. The moonfish is still swimming beneath the waves, its presence reminding you that you too are a part of the great cycle of life. The stories of your ancestors are with you, whispered through the water, the wind, and the stars. They are there to guide you, just as they guided the first Polynesians who set out on their long voyages across the Pacific Dive. It's a peaceful thought, isn't it? To think that time, space, and the world around us are all connected by an invisible thread, one that has been passed down through stories, through knowledge, and through generations. And as you drift off to sleep, imagine yourself part of that great eternal cycle, moving through time just as the moonfish does always, in sync with the rhythms of the universe. As you sink further into comfort, let's now explore the lasting impact of Polynesian navigation on the world today. You're still in the calm ocean, the rhythm of the waves rocking you gently, the stars overhead seeming to stretch infinitely in every direction. You can feel the ancient wisdom surrounding you, even though centuries have passed since the first Polynesian navigators sailed these waters. But here's the thing, while their knowledge might seem distant, it's still alive, woven into the fabric of modern navigation, ocean exploration, and even scientific research. Today, many people know about GPS, compasses, and high-tech radar, systems used in navigation, but what's easy to forget is that these advancements have roots in ancient systems. Modern sailors, explorers, and even scientists still look back to the Polynesians for inspiration. After all, how many of us would dare to navigate the vast Pacific without a modern map or satellite system? Yet the Polynesians did this, traveling across an ocean larger than the land masses of Europe and Asia combined, using only the stars, the sea, and the moonfish as their guide. That's a feat that still boggles the mind. Historians and scientists are still fascinated by the intricacy of Polynesian navigation. Studies have shown that the techniques used by the Polynesians were so sophisticated that they could be used to accurately map vast oceanic expanses without the need for modern instruments. This wasn't just a fluke. Polynesian navigators had developed a system that allowed them to memorize hundreds, even thousands, of subtle environmental cues. Everything from the movement of birds, the direction of ocean currents, the position of the stars, and yes, the behavior of the moonfish, was used to create a mental map of the ocean. But what's perhaps even more astonishing is how much we still don't fully understand about their methods. Despite our advancements in technology, the Polynesians' knowledge of the ocean and how to read it remains unmatched in some ways. Historians still debate whether the Polynesians had a universal system of navigation or whether each island culture had its own unique methods. Some argue that the navigators used wayfinding, a term that refers to navigating using the stars, winds, and sea swells, and that this method was passed down orally, encoded in stories, songs, and rituals. Others believe there may have been a standardized system that allowed navigators across different islands to communicate and understand each other's maps. In any case, the resurgence of interest in traditional Polynesian navigation has brought a deeper respect for these ancient techniques. In the 1970s, a Hawaiian navigator named Ninoa Thompson successfully used traditional Polynesian wayfinding to sail a replica of an ancient voyaging canoe, the Hokulia, from Hawaii to Tahiti, a journey that had once been made by Polynesian ancestors long before the advent of modern navigation tools. The successful voyage was a testament to the survival of this ancient art, and it marked a turning point in how the world viewed Polynesian navigational skills. It was as if the very ocean itself had revealed its secrets once more, just as it had for the early voyagers who used the moonfish to chart their paths. Imagine the courage it must have taken to set sail with no instruments, relying only on your knowledge of the stars and the natural world around you. As you float along in this imaginary canoe, with the moonfish swimming beneath you, you begin to appreciate the magnitude of what these navigators accomplished. They didn't just explore new lands, they connected islands across an entire ocean, forming a network of culture, trade, and knowledge that spanned thousands of miles. You might be wondering how this ancient knowledge was passed on in such an oral culture. Well, it wasn't just about memorizing facts or techniques. It was about connecting to the land, the sea, and the cosmos on a deeper level. Just as the moonfish signaled the passage of time, so too did the stories passed from generation to generation. These stories weren't merely practical, they were spiritual. They taught navigators how to see the world in a holistic way, understanding that the ocean wasn't a hostile force to be conquered, but a living, breathing entity to be respected and navigated in harmony with. There's a certain peace in thinking about it this way, that the act of navigation wasn't just about reaching a destination, but about participating in the rhythm of life. Every wave, every shift in the wind, every flicker of light on the water was a signal that the Polynesians read like a map that didn't require paper or ink, but instead a connection to the very forces of nature. And here's where the moonfish comes in. It wasn't just a timekeeper. It was a companion, an ally in the grand journey. Today, there are efforts to revive these ancient techniques. Modern explorers and navigators have joined forces with traditional Polynesian wayfinders to ensure that this ancient art isn't lost. There are schools dedicated to teaching the methods of celestial navigation, and even space agencies are taking notes on how the Polynesians read the stars. Who would have thought that the ancient Polynesians, navigating without the aid of technology, could still be teaching us something today? As you relax into the quiet night, the thought of these ancient techniques guiding modern explorers is a comforting one. The legacy of the Polynesians is alive, not just in the physical maps they left behind, but in the way we view the world around us. Every journey, whether across the ocean or through life, can be a meaningful, spiritual experience if we open ourselves to the rhythms of nature. And as you drift towards sleep, consider how these ancient navigators charted their course across the vast, unknown ocean. They didn't have a modern GPS or detailed maps. They had the stars, the sea, and the moonfish, guiding them on a journey that, in many ways, is still unfolding today. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of Polynesian navigation, that the journey is just as important as the destination, and that every step is part of a much larger cosmic path. As the soft waves continue to rock your mental canoe and the stars above flicker with their ancient light, let's take a deeper dive into the spiritual significance of the moonfish and how it fits into the larger cultural and religious beliefs of Polynesian peoples. You can almost feel the connection to those who came before you, those early navigators who sailed across the vast, limitless ocean not only to discover new lands, but to commune with the divine forces that govern the world around them. For the Polynesians, the ocean wasn't just a resource to be used. It was a sacred entity, a channel through which they connected with the gods. And the moonfish, well, it played a crucial role in that spiritual landscape. You see, in Polynesian mythology, the sea and the sky were intertwined in a cosmic dance of creation and destruction, and the moonfish was part of that delicate balance. Its appearance, especially as it glided through the waters during certain lunar phases, was seen as a sign, a spiritual reminder that the cosmos was in harmony. The moonfish, like the moon itself, was tied to the cycles of life. It wasn't just a timekeeper. It was an omen of change, a harbinger of new phases, both literally and metaphorically. Each new lunar phase brought with it a new aspect of existence, and the moonfish, appearing at just the right time, symbolized that transition. Historians still debate whether the moonfish was considered a direct manifestation of a deity or whether it was merely an important symbol. Some suggest that it was seen as a messenger, one that conveyed the will of the gods to the sailors. signaling the right times for travel or rest. Others believe that the fish had a more intimate connection to the divine, serving as an intermediary between the heavens and the earth. Regardless of the specifics, there's no denying that the moonfish was revered as a powerful, spiritual being, carrying with it not only the knowledge of time, but also a deep sense of connection to the gods and the natural world. Imagine, for a moment, that you are standing on the shore of an island, the cool evening breeze gently ruffling your hair. In the distance, you can see the outline of the moonfish just beneath the surface, its body glowing faintly in the moonlight. You feel a sense of peace, knowing that this creature, which has traveled these waters long before you, is part of a greater cycle. Its presence is more than just a biological phenomenon. It's a reminder that time itself is a living, breathing force, and that you too are part of it. The moonfish also played a role in the creation myths of many Polynesian cultures. It was said to embody both the calm and the storm, two forces that were essential to the Polynesian way of life. The calm waters of the Pacific were where the navigators found their course, but the storms were just as important. They represented the unpredictability of life, the forces beyond human control that shaped existence. The moonfish, with its connection to the lunar cycles, was a creature that existed at the intersection of both, the calm of the night and the tempestuous power of the sea. It was a creature of dualities, just as the sea itself was both nurturing and dangerous, both a source of sustenance and a reminder of nature's power. This spiritual connection to the moonfish wasn't just about the ocean, though it also extended to the way the Polynesians viewed time itself. Time wasn't a linear construct. It was cyclical, just like the phases of the moon. Every cycle, every turn of the tide, was a part of a greater cosmic rhythm, and the moonfish was a constant reminder of that. It was a physical manifestation of time, moving through the waters in tune with the celestial rhythms above. Its glow was like a gentle reminder that everything in life is interconnected and that the present moment is always part of a larger, unfolding story. This sense of interconnectedness was central to the Polynesian worldview. The navigators, the fish, the sea, the stars, everything was part of a larger web of life. To navigate the ocean wasn't just about getting from one point to another. It was about participating in the natural order of things, moving in harmony with the forces of the world. The moonfish, by its very existence, was a symbol of that harmony. It wasn't just about the fish itself. It was about what it represented: time, the divine, and the endless cycles that govern both the natural world and the human experience. So, as you rest here, drifting along with the soft rocking of the waves, imagine that you, too, are part of this cosmic rhythm. Just as the moonfish moves through the water, guided by the moon, so too do you move through life, guided by the rhythms of the universe. The challenges you face, the changes you undergo, are all part of a greater cycle, one that has been unfolding long before you arrived, and will continue long after you've passed. Now, the peaceful thought of it all starts to settle in. The moonfish, the ocean, the stars above all, part of a grand design that stretches out in every direction forever and ever. With every breath, you begin to feel more in tune with that design, your own rhythm syncing up with the natural world around you. You are one small part of this larger pattern, just as the moonfish is, just as the Polynesians were. Time moves, life moves, and we move along with it, guided by ancient wisdom that stretches out through the ages. And with that thought, the world around you begins to fade into the calm, steady rhythm of your breath, the ocean, the stars, and the moonfish, all gently pulling you deeper into rest. As you drift deeper into the rhythm of sleep, let's gently return to the world of the Polynesians, focusing now on how their understanding of the ocean and the celestial world intertwine with their daily lives. Imagine for a moment that you're walking through a Polynesian village nestled on the edge of an island. The air is warm, carrying the scent of salt and earth, the soft hum of the ocean nearby, and the sounds of life around you. You can hear the chatter of people preparing for the day, some weaving mats, others tending to the fish that will feed their families. Above you, the sky seems to stretch endlessly, and in the distance, the vast ocean lies beyond the horizon. But it's not just a backdrop to their lives, it's a constant, living presence full of mysteries and meaning. For the Polynesians, the ocean wasn't just a place to fish, trade, or explore. It was a world of deep spiritual significance. The ocean was not seen as something to be conquered, but as a divine presence, an extension of the gods. Just as the moonfish had its place in the celestial rhythm of the night, so too did the ocean hold its own unique role in the greater cosmic order. The sea, with all its unpredictability and beauty, was a force that demanded respect. It wasn't a mere resource, it was a vast living entity that connected everything in the world. This view of the ocean as a living, spiritual force was reflected in the Polynesians' practices and beliefs. In the same way that the moonfish guided them on their voyages, the sea itself was a source of guidance, wisdom, and connection. Sailors didn't just look to the stars for navigation. They also paid attention to the movement of the ocean, the tides, and the winds. Every element of the sea had its own rhythm, its own flow, and these rhythms were seen as signs, messages from the gods. Historians still argue over the extent to which the Polynesians had specific deities tied to different elements of nature. Some suggest that each island had its own pantheon of gods, each governing a different aspect of the world, while others believe there was a more unified system of worship that linked all the islands together. Regardless of the specifics, one thing is certain: the ocean was sacred. It was a channel through which the gods spoke, and the people listened carefully. But let's pause for a moment and think about how all this knowledge was shared. The Polynesians didn't have written records. They had oral tradition stories, songs, chants passed down from generation to generation. These stories weren't just about practical matters like fishing or sailing. They were about the deeper truths of the world. They taught the young ones how to understand the natural world, how to read the signs that the gods had left behind. They taught them that the sea wasn't just a body of water, but a living, breathing presence that could offer wisdom, guidance, and even warnings. The moonfish, with its cyclical appearances and its deep connection to the lunar phases, was an important part of these stories. Its role was both practical and spiritual. On one level, it served as a timekeeper, signaling the right moments to set sail or to rest. On another level, it was a messenger, a sign from the gods that the journey was blessed or that a change was coming. In this way, the moonfish embodied the deep spiritual connection between the Polynesians and the natural world. It was a creature that wasn't just observed, it was experienced, felt, and revered. Now, picture yourself back on that island, walking along the shore. You might hear the rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the rocks and the soft murmur of people speaking in the village. You can feel the weight of the ocean behind you, its endless expanse stretching out as far as the eye can see. It's a place of both tranquility and mystery, a place where the past and present meet, where the stories of ancestors echo in the air, and where the ocean offers its wisdom to those willing to listen. There's something profound in this connection between the Polynesians and the sea. It wasn't just a utilitarian relationship, it was a spiritual bond, a partnership that sustained and nurtured life. The ocean provided food, shelter, and the means for travel, but it also provided something deeper, a sense of purpose, a connection to the divine. and a way to understand the cycles of time and the rhythms of existence. The moonfish, swimming through the depths of the sea, was a symbol of that connection. It moved in harmony with the tides, the stars, and the moon, just as the Polynesians moved in harmony with the natural world around them. And as you rest here, breathing deeply and feeling the calm of the night settle over you, think about how this relationship between the Polynesians and the ocean can still speak to us today. In a world that often seems disconnected from nature, there's something reassuring about the idea that we can still find harmony with the world around us. The rhythms of the earth, the movement of the stars, and the ebb and flow of the tides are still there, waiting to be understood. Maybe, like the Polynesians, we just need to learn how to listen. You're drifting closer to sleep now, your body at ease, your mind floating along with the peaceful flow of the ocean. The moonfish still swims beneath the surface, its movements, in sync with the cosmos, and you too are moving with it, gently guided by the natural rhythms of the universe. As you sink deeper into the embrace of sleep, let's take a moment to explore the fascinating journey that brought Polynesian navigation techniques to the modern world. You can almost feel the pulse of the ocean beneath you, still gently swaying in rhythm with the stars above. The Polynesians may have sailed these waters thousands of years ago, but the story of their navigation didn't end with them. In fact, it didn't even truly begin to be understood by the wider world until relatively recently, a testament to the resilience and complexity of these ancient practices. For centuries, European explorers and cartographers dismissed Polynesian navigation as little more than superstition, and their knowledge was almost lost to history. It wasn't until the early 20th century that scholars began to recognize the brilliance of the Polynesians' methods, and even then, much of it was misunderstood or overlooked. In fact, the idea that humans could cross vast oceans without instruments, like maps or compasses, seemed nearly impossible to the Western mind. But the more researchers studied, the more they realized that these navigators had a system far more advanced than anyone had imagined. It was in the 1950s that the world began to pay attention to the work of an extraordinary man named Thor Heyerdahl. Heyerdahl, a Norwegian explorer, made headlines when he sailed a raft, the Kon-Tiki, from South America to the Polynesian islands, aiming to prove that pre-Columbian people could have made long ocean voyages. His journey was a landmark moment, not just for adventure enthusiasts, but for those curious about the origins of Polynesian navigation. However, Heyerdahl was working within a framework that still largely viewed Polynesian sailors as primitive or mythological figures, rather than skilled and sophisticated navigators in their own right. In the years following Heyerdahl's journey, a new wave of scholars began to challenge the prevailing notions about Polynesian navigation. One of the most important figures in this movement was a Hawaiian man named Nananoa Thompson. In the 1970s, Thompson, inspired by his ancestors' traditions, set out to resurrect the ancient art of wayfinding. Wayfinding was the term used by Polynesians to describe their intricate method of navigating by the stars, winds, and ocean swells. Thompson worked alongside traditional navigators, learning the forgotten techniques, and eventually sailing a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe called the Hokulea from Hawaii to Tahiti, using nothing but the stars and ocean currents to guide. The journey of the Hokulea was a pivotal moment in the modern rediscovery of Polynesian navigation. It proved that the ancient methods were not only possible, but highly effective, even in the modern age. It was a powerful statement that Polynesian navigators hadn't just been wandering aimlessly across the Pacific, they were purposefully navigating, using knowledge that had been passed down through generations. And perhaps most importantly, it showed the world that this knowledge was still alive, and that the traditions of Polynesian wayfinding could be revived, taught, and respected. As you imagine this great voyage of the Hokulea, picture yourself on board, surrounded by the vastness, of the Pacific. The stars above are your only map, the ocean your only guide. You know the currents, the winds, the signs of the sky, all the elements that the Polynesians once understood intimately. You feel the connection to these ancient sailors who have crossed these same waters long before you. It's not just an adventure, it's a spiritual journey, a reconnection with the natural world and the timeless traditions that have carried people across the Pacific for thousands of years. Historians still debate the exact origins of Polynesian navigation. Some believe it developed independently on various islands, while others argue that it may have been passed down from a single source. Regardless of its origins, the fact remains that Polynesian wayfinding was an incredibly sophisticated system. Some researchers believe that it relied not only on celestial navigation, but also on acute awareness of the ocean itself. The swells, the temperature of the water, the movements of fish, and the behavior of marine animals. In a way, the Polynesians were as much in tune with the ocean's life force as they were with the heavens above. This holistic approach to navigation, seeing the ocean, the stars, and the creatures of the sea as one interconnected system, is something that has profound lessons for us today. In an age of GPS and satellite technology, it's easy to forget that humans once navigated using nothing but the natural world. And yet, even in our modern era, we continue to study the ways that ancient people understood the world. In a sense, it's a humbling reminder that the universe is far more intricate and connected than we sometimes realize. Perhaps, just as the Moonfish served as a reminder of time and cosmic cycles, the story of Polynesian navigation is a reminder of the importance of reconnecting with the natural world. As you rest here in the quiet calm of your own thoughts, it's easy to imagine that you too are connected to something larger than yourself. The same ocean that carried ancient sailors now holds the same mysteries and wisdom. The same stars that guided them now hang above you, silent witnesses to the journey of life. In today's world, where much of our daily life is mediated by technology, there's something deeply grounding in remembering how these ancient navigators once sailed across vast oceans, guided only by the stars, the winds, and their own intuition. And just as the Polynesians did, we too can learn to read the signs around us, to listen to the rhythms of the world, and to find our way forward not through devices or charts, but through connection, awareness, and trust in the natural world. So, as you feel your body sinking deeper into the peaceful quiet of the night, think of the vast oceans and the stars above. You are part of the same world, the same interconnected cosmos that these ancient navigators once sailed, guided by the Moonfish and the eternal rhythms of the earth. The journey continues, and it's one you share with those who have come before. You and those who will follow after as you begin to sink further into sleep. There's a gentle shift in the air. The rhythm of your breath deepens, and you feel the pull of the ocean beneath you, even though you're miles away. It's as if the world itself is holding its breath, suspended between the waves of time and memory. Tonight, as you continue to drift deeper into this tranquil state, let's shift gears slightly and explore one of the most intriguing and enigmatic parts of Polynesian culture, the concept of taboo, the sacred restrictions that governed life. Imagine, for a moment, that you're walking through the lush forests of a Polynesian island, the scent of damp earth rising from the ground beneath your feet. The air is thick with the sounds of wildlife, the gentle rustling of leaves, and the distant call of birds. But as you make your way through the village, you sense something of quiet, unspoken reverence. There are places you cannot enter, things you cannot touch, and actions you cannot take. This is the power of taboo, a concept that dictated the sacred boundaries of life and, by extension, governed how the Polynesians interacted with the world around them. You see, taboo was not merely a set of rules. It was a spiritual framework woven into the very fabric of daily life. It was a way of protecting the sacred, of maintaining the delicate balance between the physical and spiritual realms. The Polynesians believed that everything in the natural world, every tree, every fish, every star, was imbued with a spiritual essence. This belief made the concept of tapu all the more profound. It was not just a set of prohibitions, but a means of ensuring that the spiritual energies of the world remained in harmony. At first glance, the idea of tapu might seem restrictive, even confining, but in reality, it was a profound expression of respect for the interconnectedness of all things. Under the system of tapu, the ocean and the sky were not just places. They were divine entities that had to be treated with reverence. The moonfish, for example, was part of this sacred system. Its appearance wasn't just a sign, it was a reminder that there were forces beyond human control, forces that could not be ignored. To tamper with those forces, to act without respect for them, was considered a dangerous breach of the natural order. Historians still debate the exact origins and practices of tapu, whether it was a formalized system passed down through generations, or whether it was something that evolved more organically over time. What is certain, however, is that it had profound implications for how the Polynesians viewed their relationship to the land, the sea, and the heavens above. There were areas that were strictly off-limits to outsiders, sacred places where only the most revered could enter. These places, from sacred groves to the tops of mountains, were believed to hold the spirits of the gods. To enter without permission was to risk offending those spirits and potentially bringing ruin upon the community, but it wasn't just physical spaces that were considered tapu. Entire categories of food, items, or actions could be designated as sacred, forbidden, or off-limits. For example, the moonfish itself might have been considered tapu in certain contexts, perhaps during specific lunar phases when its appearance was seen as particularly sacred. The act of fishing or hunting certain animals might have been restricted by tapu as well, ensuring that the balance of nature wasn't disrupted. These prohibitions were designed not to punish, but to maintain balance and harmony with the divine. As you continue your journey deeper into sleep, imagine what it would be like to live under such a system. Imagine waking up each morning knowing that the world around you, your village, your ocean, your sky, is governed by unseen, sacred laws. Every action, every movement has spiritual weight. You don't simply live in the world. You coexist with it, respecting its divine power and following the rhythms set out by the gods. The moonfish, appearing at the right moment, is a reminder of that divine order. Its presence is a call to remember your place in the greater scheme of things. This spiritual framework wasn't just about keeping the peace. It was about ensuring that humanity stayed in harmony with the forces of nature. The ocean, the stars, and the moonfish were all part of the same spiritual fabric. And by following the rules of tapu, the Polynesians maintained a sense of order and respect, ensuring that life continued smoothly and that the gods were kept happy. In a world where nature could be both nurturing and dangerous, tapu acted as a guided way to live in balance with the world rather than against it. Now, as you float deeper into this world of sleep, think about how the rhythms of nature continue to shape your life, even in this modern age. Sure, we don't live by the same sacred rules of tapu anymore, but perhaps there is something to be learned from that ancient system. In a world that often feels disconnected from nature, the Polynesians' reverence for the sacred rhythms of the earth and sky offers a reminder that we too can find peace and harmony by reconnecting with the natural world. Just like the moonfish, whose presence is a symbol of time and the divine order, you too are part of a larger rhythm. You are moving through the world in sync with forces both seen and unseen. The quiet, peaceful current that carries you forward is the same one that carried the Polynesians across the vast Pacific, guided by their stars and the sacred rules of tapu. The gentle ebb and flow of the ocean, the glimmer of the stars, and the occasional sighting of a moonfish, all reminders that the universe is in motion. And so are you, as your mind settles deeper into this gentle rhythm. Think of the moonfish again, its gleaming body slipping through the cool, dark water. You're part of that cosmic dance, guided by the same forces that have been in motion for eons. The ocean, the stars, the moonfish, they're all waiting, silently, to show you the way forward. And as you drift further into slumber, you realize that there's no need to fear the unknown. The rhythm of the world is always with you, gently guiding you onward, as you float toward the final edges of consciousness. There's a subtle shift in the night's rhythm. It's as if the weight of time itself is lifting, leaving you lighter and more at ease. The soothing presence of the moonfish, the stars, and the vast ocean slowly fades into the background, but not entirely. They remain, quietly guiding you. A gentle reminder of your connection to something far greater than yourself. Tonight, we've traveled across vast oceans and through ancient histories, diving deep into the quiet wisdom of the Polynesian people. But now, as the journey draws to a close, we find ourselves back on that quiet island, surrounded by the warmth of the night air and the distant sounds of the ocean. You've learned that the Polynesians were not just travelers across the sea. They were deeply spiritual people whose understanding of the world was intimately tied to the natural rhythms around them. They didn't need maps or compasses to navigate the vast Pacific. Instead, they relied on something far older and more profound, a deep, almost mystical connection to the world's elements. The moonfish, with its ethereal presence, was their guide in both the physical and spiritual realms. It's hard to imagine, now in the age of GPS and smartphones, how these ancient sailors made their way across thousands of miles of open water using nothing but their knowledge of the stars, the ocean's currents, and the creatures that swam beneath the surface. But that's exactly what they did. Perhaps as you rest here now, you can appreciate the incredible resilience and wisdom of these people. Their connection to the world around them wasn't just a practical necessity, it was a way of life. A way of seeing the universe as a single interconnected system where everything had a purpose and everything was sacred. Whether it was the moonfish gliding silently beneath the waves or the winds guiding a canoe across the sea, each element had meaning. Each moment had weight, but as you lie here, drifting closer to sleep, you might also find yourself thinking about how the ancient Polynesians' way of navigating the world can still speak to us today, in a world that often feels fractured and disconnected. Their example shows us that there's power in looking to the natural world for guidance. There's wisdom in reconnecting with the rhythms of the earth and listening to the quiet pulse of the universe that beats just beneath the surface of daily life. The Polynesians didn't just live with the world, they lived in harmony with it. And in that harmony, they found a peace that we too can seek. The ocean that carried the Polynesians across the Pacific is still here, vast and mysterious, waiting for those who are willing to listen. The moonfish, with its silvery scales, continues to move in perfect rhythm with the tides. And the stars, ancient and eternal, are still overhead, guiding the way. Maybe you too can find that same connection to the world around you. Maybe in the stillness of the night, as you fall deeper into sleep, you can hear the quiet whispers of the ocean, the winds, and the stars, reminding you that you too are part of something vast and beautiful. As the final whispers of the moonfishes journey fade into the background of your dreams, know that you are not alone. You are part of the same great cosmic dance that has been unfolding for eons. And just like the Polynesians, you are carried forward by forces beyond your control, but still within your reach. There's peace in that knowledge, a peace that comes from surrendering to the rhythm of the universe, from trusting in the guidance of the stars and the waves' dot as you drift into that peaceful slumber. Remember, the journey is never truly over. The moonfish, the stars, and the ocean are always with you, quietly guiding your way. End of script. Sweet dreams.